The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. It is another episode of Music Weekly, and this may be one of the strongest weeks of music we've ever had here on the Nerdcast Empire. It is just, I made the joke earlier, and I think it's true. We could have probably each picked 4 bands and probably not diluted the picks at all. Really impressive week of music, so really excited to bring you our picks. We'll be doing that in section number 2. In fact, I saw one of the bands that is on the screen now on our rundown. You can see Hydra has already commented on our Facebook post, so if you happen to be tuned in, welcome. We're going to talk about some awesome albums coming up in the second part of tonight's episode of the Nerdcast Empire. Joining me in studio, the guy who puts all these lists together each and every week, makes all this happen. It's Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, it's going. Yeah, another huge week. I think this kind of rivals the May 31st week where we had to throw in a bunch of bonus picks. I think there's probably room for additional picks this week that we could somehow find a way to highlight as well.
Yeah, it's crazy how good the music was this week. Just outstanding bands from so many different genres that, again, I mean, we really could have gone above and beyond to pick. And maybe we'll go back at some point and circle back to this week and maybe talk some more about some of these other bands that we didn't get to. And one of the bands that we had even spotlighted, almost thankfully, their release got moved back a week. So we can talk about them next week because it was another one that would have certainly made our list. But joining us from Parts Unknown is Chris, and it is Chris's birthday. Chris, happy birthday, and how's things going in Parts Unknown?
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's been a festivity-filled weekend for my birthday. I think I was just talking about last week about how feel like I'm really getting up there, so now I'm even further up there, so to speak. But no, it's been a fun weekend, super busy, but glad I still get to make an appearance here, even if I didn't get to dig into the playlist all that much.
Yeah, Chris is going to join us for the news section, and then he's got one band he wants to spotlight, which he mentioned on the last episode of the podcast, but then he's going to join us in the chat, but he's got to bounce just to deal with some birthday things and obviously other things going on around the house. But obviously, I feel like I should play a little bit of this.
Oh, I look forward to it every year.
So good.
And for those who don't know, that is Spirit Journey Formation Anniversary.
That's a new birthday song.
Oh, gee willikers.
Geddy Lee of Rush.
Yes, from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, as we talk about all the time. If you have not watched Aqua Teen Hunger Force, that is definitely one of the shows that helps you understand our sense of humor here on the Nerdcast Empire. But really good stuff this week. And again, we'll let Chris bounce out once we talk about a few news items first. And the first one, it's certainly the overarching topic, certainly not good news, but we wanted to shout out one of our friends of the podcast, if you will, one of the bands that we spotlighted many months ago on our podcast, Mega Colossus. Unfortunately, as everybody knows, or maybe some of our international listeners don't know, had a hurricane come through the southeast United States and unfortunately devastated the Carolinas and even farther south. And Mega Colossus from North Carolina certainly dealing with a lot of that and wanted to make a difference. And I'll let Mike kind of talk about it while I pull up the link because I'm going to share the link in the chat. But a chance, although some of their merch is kind of sold out, but a chance to pick up some Mega Colossus merch and help those who are really struggling trying to bounce back from this hurricane.
Yeah, I first noticed this on Facebook on a Friday. They posted that evidently their drummer, Doza, actually lives fairly close to some of the victims of the hurricane and was planning on delivering a truckload of supplies next week to help in the recovery efforts and relief efforts. On their Bandcamp, they put 3 of their T-shirts on sale with the money going toward that relief effort. It coincided with Bandcamp Friday, which is a thing that I was not aware of until Friday, where essentially all the money from any sales go directly to the band, and Bandcamp doesn't take a cut of it. So that's really cool. Last I checked, out of the 3 shirts, only one of them is still in stock. The other one's sold out, and I think there are only 6 left of the third T-shirt. But yeah, I mean, really cool to get to go in and help, and really encouraging to see this kind of ground level support being offered by just essentially regular people. So I don't know if it's still going on, but either way, it's definitely a band that's worth supporting, and their music's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. You picked up some merch from them earlier this year, obviously, with their album. And you can also DM the band on their Facebook page if you want to just make a direct donation. Obviously, redcross.org is a good place to go for donations. Also, kind of check like the Red Cross's website when it comes to items, because there are usually specific items that they're looking for with this type of natural disaster. I also saw an article on one of our news sites that Metallica has donated, I think, $100,000 to relief funds. A lot of the big time bands have certainly stepped up and donated money, but I thought to Chris for kind of any thoughts on that. Obviously, a really tragic time. The photos out of North Carolina, which is a place that we really love and have really come to love over the last couple of years in our trips down there. Just heartbreaking to see what people are going through trying to recover from this. It's going to take months, if not years, to get back on their feet.
Yeah, heartbreaking times, but this is kind of the moments where you really see people come out and shine. It's just another pillar of kind of this project we've got going on, where not only do we is it an opportunity to highlight amazing music, but it's also an opportunity to highlight these acts that are going above and beyond music and really putting themselves out there, helping where they can, and gives us just a way to voice what they're doing. So always a pleasure to bring these people up to the forefront and kind of show them off.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's obviously we enjoy supporting these bands each and every week. It's really cool when we can kind of talk about some of the things they're doing other than music that are making a difference in the neighborhood. And that's, part of the other part of being in a band and doing things is, you're trying to make things better for where you come from. Yeah. And these guys doing that. So really good gesture by Mega Colossus. Again, check their Bandcamp page. Even if the shirts sell out, I mean, these guys certainly worth supporting if they're willing to do this. And their music is awesome, like Mike said as well. So you're not going to go wrong. We certainly wish them all the best of luck, and we'll certainly keep everybody updated on what's going on. If they post anything else or maybe their shirts come back into stock, we'll certainly let you know. A couple small news items here. This one actually, I got a sponsored post on Facebook, which is how I find out about 90% of the concerts anymore. Yeah. And this is the full article on it, that Queensryche singer Jeff Tate has announced Operation Mindcrime, the final chapter, 2025. He's saying that this will be the last time that he performs the classic Operation Mindcrime album in its entirety. They're going to be coming to the Taft Theater, or he's going to be coming to the Taft Theater with his band. I would definitely, if all possible, to get a chance to see that. We saw Queensryche, and we've talked about it, the new version of the band, if you will, with a new lead singer. And the last time we went, it was a lot of new stuff and really, really old stuff. And, that was kind of disappointing. But to get the chance to see the Mindcrime album, easy for me to say, in its entirety, would be a great opportunity. Chris, your thoughts on Jeff Tate and chance to maybe see this album in its entirety for the last time?
Definitely something I'd be down for. I know the only time I've really been, I know I went with you guys to go try to see Queensryche and got there a little late to a Scorpion show and kind of missed out a lot of their act, but love to see Jeff Tate. And while I'm kind of lean more toward the Empire album, I would love to hear Operation Mindcrime in its entirety.
Yeah, Empire's great, obviously, as well, and I imagine he would throw in some other songs from other albums during that set. But, we've talked about this a lot. I know Jeff Tate, in some ways, maybe unfairly maligned.
Yeah.
Because they hire the younger guy who can sing all the songs the way they were originally sung. And yeah, Jeff Tate maybe can't hit every high note he could hit, but he's the guy that was the voice on all those songs. And from what we have seen and heard, he's out there doing a great job at 65 years old. I mean, we just saw two bands that are not far from that age range really go out and put a phenomenal show on. I know you're in the same boat, but I'd really like to go see this in April, I think it is, when it comes around to the Taft Theater.
Yeah, and I know there's also a date in Columbus, but I didn't check to see when that was. But Yeah, reading through this article and some of Jeff Tate's comments lately, it seems like he's very much now at peace with how things ended and kind of excited just for the amount of years that he had with Queensryche and what they were able to accomplish. I mean, definitely one of the biggest mainstream pop metal meets progressive metal bands throughout the 80s and 90s. And, to me, Operation Mindcrime, quite possibly my favorite concept album of all time. I would kind of like to see him do Mindcrime 2 on this tour as well with Mindcrime 1. I don't see them mentioning that, so that may be a stretch. But yeah, it's really cool to kind of see him relaxed through the whole thing now. And there was probably a time where it would have been neat had the band got back together, but I don't think I need that.
Yeah,
and clearly he doesn't, and the band doesn't seem to either. But we talk about big reunions, and I know we've kind of had that conversation as it pertains to vault selections you've made over the past couple weeks. And that's really exciting, but I just don't think this is one of those instances where even if they did reunite, if it would feel that way. And maybe part of it's because at the end of the day, Queensryche only has 2 of their original members remaining anyway, Michael Wilton and Eddie Jackson. Rockenfield on drums left in 2017, Tate obviously in 2012, and Chris DeGarmo, who was just kind of the right-hand man of Jeff Tate as far as writing all these amazing songs on the classic Queensryche stuff. He left in 1997, so, both the band and Jeff Tate solos seem to be happy and doing well, so I'm excited about it.
If there's no hard feelings at this point and they're all happy doing the things that they're doing, then more power to them, and certainly we encourage you to support both bands, but may not be too many more chances to see Jeff Tate singing his classic songs, so definitely encourage that. I will post the link to this article, which will include tour dates. So if this tour is coming somewhere near you, you might want to check it out. For our area, they're coming to Cincinnati on April the 12th, and then Columbus on April the 16th.
Okay.
So middle of April certainly looks like will be the best chance in this area, but the tour starts out on March the 18th in Tucson, Arizona, and will wrap up on October the 18th in North Tonawanda, New York. So definitely, if it comes to a town near you, definitely check out Jeff Tate singing Operation Mindcrime, among other things, in its entirety. One other band, and again, kind of going with some quicker news stories this week, and I just wanted to mention this because we've talked about these bands that have been doing this for a long time and continue to do it at a pretty high level. The band Saxon has announced full album performances of Wheels of Steel for 45th anniversary tour. It's called the Hellfire and Steel Tour. That will, it looks like it's going to be a European tour. Dates, which we have a lot of European listeners, so that's not too out of the realm of possibility. A lot of dates in Sweden, which Sweden's going to be a hot topic on this podcast again today. So definitely worth checking out. But certainly for fans domestically here in the United States, maybe you would hope that after the European leg of the tour that it'll swing back around and come through the United States again. But again, there's another band, Mike, that's been doing this for a long time, and crazy to see a 45th anniversary tour.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Biff Byford, lead singer, has been doing it forever. He's 73 years old, still bringing it. This isn't a band that was really on my radar till probably about the Denim and Leather album, which was a few albums later in 1981. One of those bands that I know is just kind of one of the founding fathers of the new wave of British heavy metal, super influential band to all of your favorite bands, and a band that I definitely would like to go back and kind of pick up on their catalog and see what's out there, because obviously they've been doing it so long. Again, really cool to see a band still doing it, and I'm sure this will be a great show.
Yeah, no question about it. The tour starts February 4th in Bremen in Germany. Then we'll go to Copenhagen and then into Sweden. And then we'll eventually make its way back to Germany and to Leipzig in March. So it's basically a month, and they're going to be going almost every night or every other night for a full month. So it's great to see for those guys. Still killing it after all these years. And if you get a chance, if you're in Europe, and again, because we talk about so many European bands, certainly not out of the realm of possibility. Some of our listeners are in Europe. Definitely want to check out Saxon on this 45th anniversary tour. That wraps up our news items. As we mentioned, Chris, the birthday boy, though I don't know if birthday boy is the right term, but getting up there, joining us in birthday old guy.
Yeah.
But like I said, we're gonna let you bounce here in just a few minutes. But I know there was an act that you had mentioned in your vault pick last week on our 100th episode, and so I wanted to give a chance because you mentioned there was a new album coming up. So before we let you go, we want to give you a chance to talk about that album here at the top of our new albums, new music stuff, and then we'll let you go off and do some birthday things.
Yeah, so it kind of worked out last week. I did my vault pick and kind of strayed away from a typical vault pick and went with something a lot newer, and that was Jesse Wells and his recent album Hell's Wells that he released on July 4th. Just so happened he dropped another album on September 20th named Patchwork. As I mentioned prior, this is a guy who is heavy into folk music and is getting me heavy into the genre as well. This one little less toward the kind of protest song aspect and more just songs about life, why we're here, what happens when we're not, fear and shooting for the stars, just pretty much anything you can think of, just singing about life. And it's just something I can throw on, easy listening, and the more I hear this guy, the more I love it. Some standout tracks from this album: That Can't Be Right, Fear is the Mind Killer, Saint Steve Irwin. I mean, he's got some witty stuff in here mixed in, even though it's less toward the protest side. He's got an incredible song about shopping around Walmart. The one that I've picked out for everybody just to kind of showcase, since this is more of a new music pick, so we'll actually try to play a clip, is This Is Not My Song. And while I don't try to dabble too much in guessing what the meaning is or what an artist had in mind for a song, it's always fun to just listen to it and kind of ascribe how it makes you feel and what your meaning is. And this one really touched me, just as like him talking about how the guitar isn't his own. He bought it. The chords were made up by somebody a long time ago. And even the emotions he puts in a lot of his songs aren't his emotions. They've been had before. So I think that's something that aspiring artists and dreamers all battle as they go through creating their works, is everything's already been done before. What am I going to bring new to the table? That's kind of how I take it. So hope everybody enjoys, and heck, maybe one of these days I can get in touch with Mr. Wells and just have a discussion about what some of the meanings are behind these songs.
So we'll listen to a little bit of this. This is off his new album Patchwork. This is Not My Song. So let's listen to a little bit of this here on the podcast.
This is not my song, and these are not my words. I bought the guitar, installed all the chords, and these are not my feelings. In fact, they told. I learned from a place, but mainly they're stolen by me. Oh Lord, I've stolen a girl, but it's like stealing.
Yeah, if you're into folk music, definitely check out Jesse Wells' new release, Patchwork, or one of his previous releases. Like Chris said, this is the second release, I believe, in just about 3 months. So definitely churning out the music, and this one a little bit more on the folk side. So, Chris, thanks for sharing that with us on your birthday, no less. And like I said, we'll let you get to some other things, but we'll definitely chat again on the podcast here very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'll be in the chat for anybody that's on our VOD here.
There you go. For people who want to chat along, you can chat along with the birthday guy. Wish him happy birthday for us in the chat. So great to have Chris along with us once again on the podcast. And like I said, he's going to get off and do some birthday stuff. So we'll let him do just that. And we will continue on with the podcast once I figure out how to disconnect the voice call in Discord. So we'll get that done. And then we'll move on to what our picks are for this week. And before we do that, let's again kind of talk about how all this goes down. Each and every week, Mike will pull from a couple of different music sources the top new releases from any given week in rock and metal, and then he will pull different songs from these albums put together into a YouTube playlist. And then we go through and listen to them all, and we try to pick 2 new releases each that we can spotlight in rock and metal. And honestly, again, this was a week that was just absolutely loaded with amazing music. So it was a challenge to try to narrow it down to 2 picks each. And I think, like I said, we may at some point go back and talk a little more about some of the other tracks that came up this week and some of these other bands, because honestly, this is a week that we could have really went nuts and made about 4 or 5 picks apiece and not run out of good music. But with that said, it is time to get to this week's picks. And of course, a reminder, 2 things. Number 1, if you are in the chat, we just posted the link to that YouTube playlist. If you want to pick your own songs, feel free to do that. If you're watching on the YouTube VOD, that link probably popped up at the top of the screen or will very shortly, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. And a reminder, if you're listening on the podcast version of this podcast, you will not get the audio clips. You've got to be here live. That's your best bet, 7 o'clock Eastern Time every Sunday night, or the YouTube VOD or the Twitch VOD. That's where you're going to find the music clips, assuming that YouTube or Twitch does not mute the songs. With all that said, it's time to get to this week. We're talking September 20th this week, and again, just an absolutely loaded week of music. So, Mike, we will let you get to it. What is your first pick for this week?
Yeah, before I get into that, I do kind of want to talk about just some of the music that was released this week, because there were a lot of things by both bands that maybe our listeners are unfamiliar with, as well as really big established acts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Charlotte Wessels had a new album, former lead singer Delane.
That was really good.
That was good stuff. We had, let's see here, a new one from Nightwish as well. Good album there. Seether back with a new album. I honestly wasn't sure they were still around, but yeah, they had a new album this week as well.
And that was good.
A live album from Rainbow, a live album from Skid Row. Compilation from Michael Schenker, kind of revisiting his UFO years. It was really neat.
Interesting.
The band Sweet, like 70s rock legend Sweet, still at it. They had a new album as well.
Yeah.
A band called Vendit, who I wasn't familiar with, had an album released this week, and it's actually the band featuring the son of Corey Taylor as well as the son of Clown from Slipknot. So that's
crazy.
And they do kind of sound like Slipknot. So there you go.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as it turns out.
But yeah, so a lot of stuff out there to be excited about. We kind of steered clear of a lot of the main acts, and we've picked a couple that maybe don't have that level of recognition, but certainly worth listening to. And
yeah.
With that being said, my first pick is actually the second full-length album from the Swedish heavy metal band Neptune. The album is called End of Time.
This is going to be one of those weeks where pretty much everything one of us picks, the other one probably would have picked in different, either if it wasn't picked by the other person or if we had multiple picks, because again, everything was so outstanding this week, and this was no exception.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple instances too where our picks are really long-standing bands that have interesting histories and stories behind what got them here. Like I said, this band, it's their second album. They've been around since 1979. Under their original name, Warrians, playing kind of a softer rock sound. In 1980, they changed their name to Neptune, adopting more of like a classic metal, new wave of British heavy metal sound. They were around from 80 to 87. They've released some demos and EPs and compilations, and then they disappeared. They didn't come back around until 2017. Their first full-length album finally came out in 2020, Northern Steel. Kind of delving into their history, which if you go on their website, they have the entire story of what they've been through and all of that. You see members shuffling in and out. They're a Swedish band, so a lot of the members had to leave for a while to go serve in the military. But yeah, it's probably the first time I've ever seen a band release their first album and then 2 years later release a box set for their 40th anniversary. Kind of an interesting scenario there. But like kind of what I mentioned before, sound that they switched to is very classic metal. They list their influences as Judas Priest, Saxon, Iron Maiden. Kind of going into the lore of the album End of Time is kind of interesting. It draws in for inspiration from Harald Hardrada, King of Norway from 1046 to 1066. He unsuccessfully claimed the Danish throne until 1064, and then the English throne until 1066. His death at the Battle of Stamford Bridge is considered by many to be the end of the Viking era, hence the name of the album, End of Time.
Wasn't 1066 the last time that England was invaded?
I think so. I know that year, like
Rings a bell.
Yeah, I knew that was an important year.
Interesting.
I feel like I'm on the trivia episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Answered the Backstreet Boys.
The Battle of Hastings. Standout tracks on this album include Metal Hearts, Bright as Steel, End of Time, Sun Goes Down, and the song that I picked out for you, the song Highlands.
Yeah, let's check this out. Really excited for this one, Neptune. It's the End of Time. That's the name of the album. This is the 9th track off of that album. This is Highlands. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Okay, first off, I hope if you're listening to this podcast, you listen to that on your headphones, because if you don't get to really hear that through the headphones, because again, this happens every week we do this podcast. I listen to things on these speakers, and it's like, oh, that's cool.
That's fine, yeah.
And then I put these headphones on, and you really get to hear the left and right channel mix the way they intend it, and it just blows your mind. Like, first off, it starts off, it feels just very much like your typical Viking metal, like so many bands that were probably influenced by this band, Neptune. But then you get like the synthesizers and like the distorted audio that feels like it was passed through some sort of synthesizer or something, and that's on a totally different level. So it's like these guys, again, even though they've been around forever, they're still like innovating and coming up with different ways to stand out and kind of showing people who are doing this type of music that, hey, it doesn't have to all sound the same. Like, this is wild stuff, and it's really cool to hear it.
Yeah, and I think when you go into the story of the band, when they kind of have the different bullet points going through major milestones for them, in the early 80s, it's, I mentioned before, they changed their sound before really even getting started to be more of like a classic metal sound. And then later on, it mentioned that, in the mid-'80s, when you had kind of more of the pop metal stuff taking over, that was when one of the members of the band decided to switch and be a keyboardist just to kind of give them what was more of a popular sound at the time. And clearly that's, they're still, all these years later, tinkering with that formula to get the sound they want.
It's crazy. But this is really great. This is, again, one of the albums this week that's just a start to finish, just enjoyable album. Kudos to these guys for continuing to put out great music all these years later, and maybe stronger than ever. Neptune, End of Time is the album. Definitely want to pick that up because it is really, really strong. That's first of 2 picks this week. As always, you have a second pick. What do you have for us in pick number 2?
Yeah, so my second pick might be a little boring in terms of long, storied history. They've been around a while, but they don't really have nearly the ups and downs, I think, as a band like Neptune does. That being said, my second pick is the newest album from the Swedish hard rock / AOR band Eclipse. The album is Megalomanium 2.
Feeling there's a pattern this week in our picks. That is 2 out of 2 from Sweden, and it will not be the last.
Yeah.
But no, this is really, really good. This album just flies. Both your first pick and this pick, albums just fly by. About 39 minutes for each one, and you just get into them, and you're to the end of it almost immediately. It's like, wow, I want some more. Like, that's not, it's not enough. But again, these guys absolutely knock it out of the park with this release. Yeah,
unlike Neptune, where it seemed like they spent a lot of time trying to fine-tune what they were doing and kind of having members jump in and out, this band's been pretty solid. They started in 1999 and, formed by singer, guitarist, bassist Eric Martinson and drummer, keyboardist Anders Berlin. They clearly set out to be an AOR band, and that has worked for them. It's kind of interesting, though, when you consider that being 1999. Their first album came out in 2001. Not really a time where people were seeking that kind of sound. They had to be kind of strangers in a strange land in that era, being what seems like such a pop sensibility-minded rock act. by their second album in 2004, they'd signed with the Italian record label Frontiers Records.
Of course.
So, I mean, that's a record label we talk about all the time, and this band hooked up with them way back in 2004, likely before a lot of the major acts had signed on with them.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot to say about these guys besides if you're looking for classic AOR hard rock sound, these guys are it. Their music is ultra polished, kind of similar in a way as far as that level of polish to my vault pick later.
Yeah.
Just very, very tight as far as the playing and the music. The vocals are tremendous. Also kind of cool that on YouTube, if you look up this newest album, they have 4 music videos just from the new album already. Standout tracks include Apocalypse Blues, The Spark, Falling to My Knees, Still My Hero, Until the War is Over, and the song that I picked is actually The Spark.
So let's check these guys out. Really great stuff from Eclipse. This is Megalomanium 2, the name of the album. This is the second track off of that album. It is The Spark. Let's listen to that now. I mean, it's music that is right up my alley when you start talking about AOR and you know, hard rock and these guys. But what can I say? Like they've absolutely nailed this sound, and it seems like AOR in Sweden is just on a different level. Like the bands in this country have just figured out how to master this sound, and they're producing English speaking rock music that feels absolutely out of the 80s in the English-speaking world, and we're getting it out of Sweden.
Yeah.
And these guys, again, just this whole album is so good, and it's, like you said, so polished, so tight. It's just a work of art.
It makes me wonder just how big this kind of music still is in Europe. I mean, you have a record label like Frontiers that caters to these bands, and these guys have been doing it as long as they have. Like, clearly there's still quite the market there for it.
I mean, is this, and I don't know, maybe some of our European listeners or bands can clue us in, like, you know, we hear every year about Eurovision and how big of a deal it is. We've talked about Eurovision. Obviously, the band Lordi had a lot of success there. And I don't know if that's, in some way, you know, we talk in our other podcast about how in Japan we're seeing so many young musicians that are playing instruments and really kind of continuing to learn the craft, because that's just kind of what's going on over there. It just feels like in Europe, whether it's related to Eurovision, whether there's other factors involved, but it just feels like there's just such a musicianship in this specific type of music and others, but they've got it figured out, and I don't know why we don't see it more worldwide, but it just feels like Sweden specifically, but in Europe more generally, they seem to get it.
It feels like we're lagging behind now.
Yeah.
Much like math test scores, we're lagging behind in guitarmanship, and that is really unfortunate.
We need more math rock, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
But this is great stuff. Eclipse, Megalomanium 2. Definitely check this one out. Really great stuff from those guys this week. As always, I have 2 picks of my own as well, and a lot of the things that Mike just talked about Eclipse are going to apply again when we get to my first pick. We are talking about an AOR rock band from Stockholm, Sweden.
Wow.
This is Hydra with the album Rehydration.
Hail Hydra.
That's right. This is the second studio album for Hydra, hence the name Rehydration. After 2022's Point Break, more keyboards here, I think. But again, you know, we just heard a couple of artists that are not afraid to use keyboards, but they use them in a very rock and roll way, and the guitars in these songs are still really awesome. So it works out really well. It feels a little bit more like Journey in their Stadium era, or even like classic Styx with Dennis DeYoung. Some of their harder rocking songs, I think, kind of fit with these guys. these guys are longtime friends from the Swedish rock scene. Henrik Hedström is the songwriter slash musician. Daniel Flores, the drummer and producer. Bassist Johnny Trobro, and singer Andy I'm going to get that one wrong. Kraveljiaka. I apologize for that. That is, these guys are all friends, and they play music like they're all friends. Like it just feels like a cohesion here that is maybe different than a lot of the bands that we've talked about. But really, really a fun album. This was another fast listen. I got through this album so quickly because it was just so good beginning to end. It's hard to even recommend specific tracks because honestly the whole album is just really, really good. But if I have to be pinned down for some choices, standout tracks are We Belong, Marionette, Two of a Kind. The song we're going to listen to today is Eye of the Storm from the band Hydra. So let's check this out now. This is Hydra from the album Rehydration and Eye of the Storm here on the Nerdcast Empire.
I was drowning in your eyes, in the quicksand of your lies. Now I'm fighting once again for my life. Going down inside this storm. Now I'm sinking through the floor. Inside the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm. I've turned my back on you, babe.
Yeah, the vocals are amazing. Obviously, you have the bombastic keyboard, just building to this epic chorus it's just really outstanding stuff from these guys. Mike, your thoughts on Hydra?
Yeah, everything about it just feels so stadium, anthem, epic. And I feel like the shelf life on that originally here in the States was so short that you didn't fully get to exhaust everything you could do with it. I feel like it was in fashion and then it wasn't. Even bands like Journey, I feel like they probably should have been prominent way longer than they were, and I think maybe that's why years later people have remembered how good they were. So I think there's still an appetite, at least for me, for that kind of music, and these guys nail it.
And shout out to Hydra, as we mentioned in the open. These guys have already commented on our Facebook links, so
It's always cool.
whether you guys are listening or not, thank you for the awesome music, and we really appreciate it. And thanks for reacting to our posts. So we really appreciate that as well. Anytime anybody likes or comments or shares our posts, we really do appreciate it. It helps our podcast out tremendously. So hopefully we can continue to do this awesome podcast each and every Sunday night. That is the first of my 2 picks this week. Got another really awesome one for my second pick. And this is another group, as Mike mentioned earlier, a group that has been around for a while. This is another one that has been around for a while. The band is Danger Zone, and the album is Shut Up, with an exclamation point at the end of that. It is a shut up, as it turns out. This is a heavy power metal AOR group from Bologna, Italy. So we are jumping to Italy this time from Sweden, but another country we have frequented quite often on this podcast.
Home of Frontiers Records.
Home of Frontiers Records. Founded in 1983, although they were around under a different name from 1980 to 1983. This is only their 5th studio album, and all of them have happened since 2011. They released 5 demos and 1 EP from 1983 to 1991. Their first release since 2019's Don't Count on Heroes. Because of the pandemic and everything, there was a hiatus that kind of followed that. They got things going again in 2022. And I love this quote because, man, if there was like a quote that described my music taste on this podcast, I feel like this should be on a shirt somewhere. The website said they restarted in 2022 with a decision to, quote, return to a sound reminiscent of the golden era of American melodic hard rock.
I love it.
I love it. That is exactly what I'm looking for. Giacomo Giantelli is on lead vocals, Roberto Priori on lead guitar, Paolo Palmieri on drums, Matteo Minghetti on bass, Danilo Fagiolino on guitar, and Pier Mazzini on keyboards and vocals. These guys just absolutely get it. It's really great stuff. It's just catchy, and again, another album that was just an easy listen from the beginning to back. Beginning to end. Standout tracks include I Like It, Evil, I Don't Care, and the song we're going to listen to for the podcast is Tell Me the Truth. So let's listen to Danger Zone from their album Shut Up. This is Tell Me the Truth, track number 3. So let's listen to that now.
Tell me the truth, don't try to hide your eyes. I want the truth, 'cause when I look between the lines, I know something's going on. Don't know why the magic's gone away. Are you gonna stay? Rejected.
Again, you heard the keyboards come in there right after the chorus,
good.
but it's just so outstanding. And again, they mix it all together really well. It's very polished. But again, this is the kind of music that I want to hear on the radio. All 4 of the groups that we've chosen are stuff that I would find a radio station played music like that and listen to it almost nonstop. But really great stuff from these guys that just continue to put out great music after all these years, just past their 40th anniversary a year ago. So great to see the Danger Zone still rolling along. Mike, your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, for a band that's been around that long, music still sounds vibrant, full of life, fresh. Definitely something I could listen to a lot and intend on it, actually. Yeah, I love the melody in the chorus. Just so cool sounding. What else can you say? I think back to like the rise of satellite radio and just all the different options for channels. And to this day, it's like, why are there no channels that cater to, more of that melodic rock, power metal, that kind of stuff that I would actually want to listen to?
Yeah.
I feel like it's still very underserved certainly in Sirius XM, but probably just overall.
Yeah, that's what we're here for on the podcast, evidently, is to bring you this music. And Mike actually puts together a Spotify playlist on our Spotify that has songs from all these episodes. And basically, I think each quarter you come up with a new playlist. So at some point, we'll share those out on social media. Make sure you can check those out. But
yeah, I've got my picks on there so far. So
we'll
have to do some catching up on that.
We'll get to all those as we go, but really great stuff. And again, Danger Zone. It's hard to even think of like what I can compare them to because they really have a sound that's, even though it feels like, as they mentioned, that classic era of American melodic hard rock, it also feels unique too. Like the singer, the harmonies, the music. I mean, they just really did a great job. Check those guys out. Danger Zone, the album Shut Up. Our final new music pick of the week. Before we get to the vault, it's time to talk about our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can listen to all of our previous episodes. You can check out our store, get your Nerdcast Empire merch, something we should probably promote a little more, but really cool stuff from the merch store you can pick up. Really great stuff on the Nerdcast Empire. Coming up this week, we're going to be a day early with our midweek podcast. It'll be Wednesday. For what is normally Anime Thursdays. It could end up being kind of a catch-all again. We'll see. But that'll be coming up 7 p.m. Wednesday night on the Nerdcast Empire as I am going into a 4-day, 4-broadcast weekend starting Thursday through Sunday. You can catch me on ESPN+, Northern Kentucky women's soccer Thursday and Sunday, and volleyball on Friday and Saturday. So really good stuff. We'll still have Music Weekly coming up next Sunday. It'll be the music of September the 27th. It's got some big shoes to fill to try to keep up with what September the 20th gave us. But find out if it does 1 week from tonight. Join us on the podcast, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on the Nerdcast Empire. But it's time to get to the vault, where Mike and I will give you a classic album that you should check out to add to your collection. And your pick this week, obviously, you're going back through the alphabet again. We'll talk about that, exactly what you're doing here in a moment. But this album is really, really good, and I was re-listening to it a little earlier, and there were just songs that I had totally forgotten about off of this album that are just so good that I think people will immediately know the hits, but there's tracks that weren't necessarily hits that were really awesome as well. So tell us about your vault pick for this week.
Yeah, so as always, I am making my way through the alphabet, this time based on the Wikipedia entry for list of glam metal bands. Whether some of them are glam or not, doesn't really matter. They're on the list.
Sure.
That's all I care about at this point. So I made it up to the letter G after last week doing the Fastway Trick or Treat soundtrack, which is tremendous. Everyone should listen to it. So on to the letter G. My pick this week is from the band Giant. It is their 1989 debut album, Last of the Runaways.
Yeah, this is such a great album, and their hits obviously everybody will know, but like I said, this is an album everybody should listen to front to back.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I certainly knew it from the hits, but it gave me more than enough reason to go and check out the whole thing, and what I found was a tremendous album. As I mentioned, this is the debut studio album from the Nashville, Tennessee rock band. Had the biggest hits for the band, I'm a Believer, and I'll See You in My Dreams on this album. The band was the creation of industry vets Dan and David Huff. Dan Huff has been all over the place. This guy has played guitar on albums for Michael Jackson, Amy Grant, Whitesnake, Juice Newton, Michael W. Smith, Peter Cetera, Whitney Houston, Barbra Streisand, Kenny Rogers, etc. More my knowledge of him came from the fact that he actually produced 2 Megadeth albums, Cryptic Writings and Risk. Was kind of maligned for a while because of that in the metal community. I think both those albums are fine, but I get why, especially after Risk, why maybe he was villainized to some degree because that was such a departure from Megadeth's classic sound. Also produced albums for Faith Hill, Rascal Flatts, and Lone Star, so heavy country music presence as well. Also worth noting, he produced a couple songs on Taylor Swift's 2012 album Red. So
He's making some money.
yeah, he's had a pretty big career, I'd say. So that being said, I mean this dude and his brother have been in the industry forever. The album was bound to have all sorts of polish and be super well produced, and it was definitely that. Kind of funny, the Wikipedia post on the album includes part of a review from the Washington Post. Quote, "The top 40 strategies of industry vets Dan and David Huff's quartet are so airtight they're suffocating. Latest of the pop metal careerist would be a more appropriate title, as opposed to the actual title Last of the Runaways." But yeah, I that was probably not wrong, but maybe a little scathing. Standout tracks on this album include I'm a Believer, Innocent Days, I'll See You in My Dreams, It Takes Two, Hold Back the Night. Just kind of that pop metal leaning more on the pop side sound, but done perfectly.
Innocent Days is a track that maybe enough people don't talk about. Obviously, everybody knows the big hits. And technically, I'll See You in My Dreams was their biggest hit. I'm a Believer, certainly another one that is kind of, I think has gotten more airplay even more recently on like hair metal channels and stuff like that. But Innocent Days is also an excellent track. Definitely worth checking out. It's interesting to me looking at Dan Huff's like discography is that so many of the, like clearly he pivoted when country music became
big
country pop in the late 90s. And like so many of these acts, when I worked at WSWO Radio, like these are the acts we were playing when I was there, because you start with Shania Twain, Winona Judd, Martina McBride, who I always really loved her music, Faith Hill, Billy Ray Cyrus, Lone Star, Shit Daisy, their original album, The Whole Shebang, Faith Hill again. And so like there was that era right there at the beginning, Leanne Rimes, Carrie Underwood, all those artists that were kind of in the rotation at Kicking Country back in the late 90s, early 2000s before it's
kicking it.
before its untimely demise in the early 2000s. But yeah, I mean, obviously the dude's just a legend of the business and continues to do amazing things. Alan Pasqua, as I mentioned to you off the air, weird one on his Wikipedia page noted that he co-composed the original CBS Evening News music, like, which is kind of weird. He also toured and recorded with Bob Dylan, Santana, Cher, Michael Bublé, Eddie Money, Joe Walsh, Pat Benatar, Rick Springfield, John Fogerty. So, again, as we've talked about with several of these picks of yours for this round through, is another example of bands who got pigeonholed as one thing, but were generally made up of these amazing musicians that knew music, knew how to create hit music, and really, some of them, like obviously Dan Huff, seemed to do just fine for himself after Giant went away, or at least kind of, went into the background, eventually did come back. But Some of them did not. Some of those bands either just continue on kind of toiling for years or just dissolved and never came back, and it's really a shame.
It's kind of interesting because this is essentially a sleeper supergroup.
Yeah.
You may not necessarily know the individuals by their name because of their own work, but the work that they've done in the studio and what they've contributed to some of your favorite artists and just multi-million album selling artists, like there's no doubt that these guys are kind of ringers.
Yeah, without question. And like I said, this album is really, really good. You should definitely check out this album from Giant. And great vault pick this week in the letter G of the glam metal bands. Obviously, this is always an exercise where we go through and we talk about a year. We started all the way back with 1969, Chicago Transit Authority, their debut album, which eventually became Chicago. And we are now up to 1998. So this is going into the end of my first year of college, beginning of second year of college. So some of these songs were burned in my head from my time working at ACRN. The Rock Lobster in Athens, Ohio, at Ohio University. Some of them are just songs that were just on the radio nonstop. But we'll get to some honorable mentions for my album picks for 1998. We'll tell you what my pick is, which is obviously on the screen, so you probably can figure that out. And then Mike will fill in the gaps of any ones that I might have missed, which I'm sure there's always some. Follow the Leader, the Korn album, came out in August of 1998. Included Freak on a Leash, which obviously was huge.
Yeah.
Probably their best known song off of that album. A lot of Korn fans for sure. I know Chris, who, of course, again, his birthday today, big Korn fan, so wanted to shout that out. 5 from Lenny Kravitz. This was really like Lenny Kravitz coming back into the mainstream after, he had a bunch of hits in the 80s. And this was where we got Fly Away and American Woman on this release, and really a chance for him to basically get back on the charts again. So really cool to see for Lenny Kravitz. And there, of course, Chris jumping in with another Aqua Teen reference. We are full of them this week, for sure. Americana, the Offspring album, 1998. Pretty fly for a white guy. Why don't you get a job? The kids aren't all right. She's got issues. Again, just that is the type of music that was popular on the rock radio at that time, and I really enjoyed those guys, as we've talked about in the past, so this is really good stuff from them. Hellbilly Deluxe, the 13 Tales of Cadaverous Cavorting Inside the Spook Show International. That is the full-length title of Rob Zombie's release from 1998. Of course, maybe the most well-known song off that album is Dragula. Also Living Dead Girl, Super Beast as well.
Super Beast is a great song.
It is a great song. And again, Rob Zombie is great. So definitely worth checking that one out for sure. Vainglory Opera came out in 1998 from Ed Guy. Not necessarily like a big hits album of theirs. Vainglory Opera, the song itself on that album is really good. You had Fairy Tale, some other songs off of that album, but really not a ton of like singles off of that album.
Yeah, that was my vault pick back from the March 8th episode. Tremendous album, great songs. Until We Rise Again, Scarlet Rose, Fairy Tale, Walk on Fighting, Him, But Here I Am. Just probably, I think it might have been the first Ed Guy album I ever listened to, but yeah, just amazing.
Yeah, definitely always worth a re-listen for those guys. And again, they're going to show up again. We're going to get to Theater Salvation next year when we start talking about them. Heart from L'Arc-en-Ciel. Maybe most notable for Niji, which was used in Rurouni Kenshin, the motion picture, as the opening theme. Also known the title Rurouni Kenshin Requiem for the Ishin Shishi, always hard for me to say, which is the Japanese title, anglicized, but really good from those guys. And again, they're just going to continue on, and they're going to show up again a few times on this list. All the Pain Money Can Buy, second studio album from Fastball, which of course included The Way and Out of My Head. Couldn't not mention that. That was everywhere on the radio, and I honestly have never listened to the album beyond those two songs. Might be worth doing just to see what the rest of the album sounds like, but obviously those two songs were mega hits. Feeling Strangely Fine, second studio album from Semisonic. Again, really only known for Closing Time, the one big hit they had that you probably continue to still hear at every bar when it's closing time or any time where they're trying to run people out. That song will live forever. So anytime you write something that lives forever, I guess you have done your job. So Garage Inc., definitely worth a mention. It's a compilation album of cover songs by Metallica. Normally I don't include compilations, but again, this is just a really good compilation. It's got a lot of great covers on there. Whiskey in the Jar was one that I think kind of got airplay off of this album. Some of these covers are from other albums or other recorded at other times, but that was one that really kind of broke through off of this album.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was a 2-disc set that basically had the first disc was all new covers, and then the second disc was kind of like old EP stuff that they were compiling together finally. Really dug the new stuff. I mean, obviously the old stuff was classic too, but I'm not a Seeger fan, but Turn the Page was a great cover.
They did a great job on that.
Die Die My Darling.
Yeah.
One that is underrated because it really didn't get radio play and no one ever talks about it is their Merciful Fate medley.
I knew you were going to mention that.
That is one that I wasn't super familiar with Merciful Fate or King Diamond at that point in time, and it was kind of that song that turned me onto them, and just when all you know of their sound is Metallica covering them, when you first listen to the real songs, you're not prepared for what that sounds like, especially when you consider King Diamond's vocals compared to James Hetfield.
Totally different.
If you listen to that medley and then go pull up Merciful Fate's Corpse Without a Soul, you'll think there's something wrong with the MP3 or the download.
Yeah.
It's just King Diamond's falsetto is just so prevalent. You're just like, is that really what that sounds like? That's amazing. Astronomy is another great one, and you mentioned Whiskey in the Jar. And honestly, again, not a huge
Tuesday's
fan
Gone.
of the original act, but Tuesday's Gone, great cover too.
Yeah, that's one of those, and there are a couple of them on here that I almost think the cover surpassed the original. I think Turn the Page is a perfect example of that.
It makes me appreciate those songs probably way more than I did, and I probably should have the whole time.
Yeah, and I think Turn the Page to me felt like a Metallica song. Like it felt like it could have been.
It felt like a Load Reload era Metallica song.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Like so, it really kind of fit. But Whiskey in the Jar is still one of my all-time favorites. And again, disc 2, as Mike mentioned, some of the covers that were here, there, and everywhere. They basically put together into which included "Am I Evil," "Stone Cold Crazy,"
Blitzkrieg.
Which,
we mentioned them a week ago.
Yeah, so I mean, good stuff on both albums for sure. The pick for this week is one of a couple of albums that I bought that were among my first albums I ever purchased. Another one we're going to get to next week, which could very well be the pick next week, even though it really only has one song on it. We'll talk about that next week. This is Godsmack, and this is the self-titled album. And as we mentioned, we brought this album up last week because it was originally released in 1997 under the title All Wound Up. They were signed to Republic/Universal in June of 1998. It was edited, remixed, and then became Godsmack, the self-titled. Important that they did do some remixing to it because they broke up a song that was called Get Up, Get Out into 2 tracks. The intro portion of it was retitled Someone in London. Whatever was a separate single that was added to the later pressings of All Wound Up, but that ended up being their big hit, obviously, off of that. Also, Keep Away, Voodoo, Bad Religion. But it is very much, as Chris mentioned, a lot of songs about people wanting people to go away, keep away, all this. But, this was one of those albums that just, it was in an era that maybe where I wasn't listening to as much hard rock as I was more pop rock, maybe even a little more country at that point. And this was kind of that album that got me back listening to hard rock music, maybe for the first time for an extended period of time. And this album is really good. The ratings at the time really weren't all that great, which is interesting that it didn't really turn out that way. But it was certified 4 times platinum in 2001. It was one of the top 10 hard rock albums of 1998, according to Loudwire. Won debut of the year. It's not a whole lot you can say about it. It reached number 2 on the Heat Seekers chart, 22 on the Billboard 200 chart. Singles were top 10, several of them. It's just a great rock and roll album by a band that was just getting started and maybe kind of caught a break. They wrote some really good stuff that basically with a little polish and a little bit of editing became these mega hits that kind of set the band up for everything they were about to do.
Yeah, I don't know if I can adequately explain just how big some of these songs were. Like how many times you would hear Whatever or Voodoo on the radio. They were all over the place. And I don't know if they've written a song better than Whatever up to this point.
Man, that's the truth. And I mean that as no disrespect to those guys, but that was a great song that you just come right out of the gates with.
Yeah, that's, the amount of times I had that I was listening to that in a car in 1998, 1999, it was everywhere, man. And just felt when maybe rock wasn't necessarily in the forefront or as cool as it used to be, this kind of felt fresh and had attitude to it. Everyone loved it. There's, even if people dropped off on these guys over the years, like, no one can possibly truthfully admit they didn't enjoy this.
The thing about Whatever is it really feels like it's got the attitude of punk music in a hard rock heavy metal format. Yeah. Like the message feels very punk, better, go away. Like, and yet they did it in a metal format, in a hard rock format that almost made it more palatable to the wide masses, even though that seems weird talking about rock and metal being maybe a mass experience, but this really was.
I feel like it was a good contrast to a lot of more of like the mopey post-grunge stuff that was still kind of lingering around. You could relate more to this than, some of the other bands who just kind of made you depressed listening to them. It's hard to argue looking at everything that came out in 1998 that this isn't certainly one of the top albums.
It feels like this album was smacking the people around who were listening to the other albums that were depressing and just not enjoyable. But great stuff from Godsmack. Definitely worth mentioning. Like I said, there's another album I bought in Athens at OU that will be on the list. Whether it's my pick next week, I don't know. Because, again, it really only had one song, and it was the first song on the album. But we'll talk about that next week. I know there's always albums I miss. Mike, you go through and check out the albums from 1998. What did I not cover from that year?
It is kind of funny. I feel like we're slowly starting to decrease the amount of albums that I feel the need to point out each year.
Yes.
I feel like that's a trend that's going to continue, especially as I don't know if Wikipedia is going to capture all of the stuff that I bought or I am into over the years. You start getting a little more obscure. But, that being said, the debut from Amon Amarth, One Cent from the Golden Hall, came out.
Yeah.
One that's kind of relevant to what we've been talking about lately, Van Halen 3 as well. Their album with Gary Cherone had the song Without You, which was actually really good. Symphony X, Twilight and Olympus, Blind Guardian, Nightfall and Middle Earth. You didn't mention Eve 6.
I didn't, man. That song got played to death in Athens in 1998, and I didn't understand the lyrics necessarily back then.
Or Am I Origami, I believe, is one of the lines, right?
That is. Fold it up and just pretend, right?
Something like that.
Like, I don't believe origami is pretend. Like, I think that's the lyric. I
guess pretending that it's not the thing you make isn't a real thing.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know. But there is something, like so many songs from that era that I just wanted to throw my radio out of my car.
You wanted to find nothing but faith in nothing.
Yes. But now it's like I can at least listen to it and appreciate that time. But yes, Eve 6, definitely there inside out.
Bad Religion, No Substance, an album that isn't necessarily among my favorites of theirs, but had some good songs. Shades of Truth, No Substance, Mediocre Minds. Big one for me, Iced Earth, Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Yep.
Tracks like Burning Times, Melancholy, Disciples of the Lie. Really cool album. One that I have to mention because I saw the band live kind of around this time, Orgy, their album Candy Ass came out.
Oh, okay.
With their cover of Blue Monday and the song Stitches, both classic. Marilyn Manson's Mechanical Animals.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, this was one of the later albums of his when he was really a big deal. You had songs like The Dope Show, Rock is Dead, I Don't Like the Drugs, but the Drugs Like Me. Dope Show is still an all-time just classic song.
It is, for sure.
Another one that I honestly only know this song. I've never listened to the album, but it's one that if you're listening to like the 90s on 9, I'm pretty sure they still play it fairly regularly. The album by the New Radicals. Maybe you've been brainwashed too with their hit, You Get What You Give.
Yeah.
That song is... it's a great song.
It is.
There was a lot of kind of drama around it because he seemed to be calling out some major artists at the time, but... don't know whatever happened to that guy, but that was a good song.
That was a song that really felt like it was an 80s song that somehow just didn't get recorded until 1998.
Yeah.
Like it feels like it could have been one of those like 80s rock pop bands that could have done that, or some sort of British band from the 80s.
I could see that.
And no, it was 1998, and it is a classic song for sure.
But yeah, that's about it for 1998.
1998, crazy year. 1999, we're gonna get lit up again when we get to 1999.
That's a classic.
That is going to be on the list again. Will it be the pick next week? You'll have to tune in to find out, which means it is time to bring this week's edition of the Nerdcast Empire to a close. We appreciate everybody being with us for episode 102 of the Nerdcast Empire and Music Weekly number 34. Great stuff, as always, this week from Mike and Chris. And again, happy birthday to Chris, and appreciate him joining us for our first portion of the podcast live, then, of course, in the chat afterward as well. Next week, Wednesday, we'll be with you 7 o'clock Eastern time for what is typically Anime Thursdays. It'll be something. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe we'll talk wrestling. Maybe we'll talk music. Who knows what we'll talk. It'll be coming up Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern on the Nerdcast Empire. And then next Sunday, 7 o'clock Eastern time, we'll be back with another episode of Music Weekly. It is the music of September the 27th coming up next week. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to everyone who has commented, liked, shared any of our posts, or has tuned in live or on the VODs. We really appreciate you. We thank you so much for allowing us to do this each and every week. That's going to wrap things up. For the guys and everybody else, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.